Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Z Trigger Expanded Universe podcast. My name is William Hill.
I'm Brandon Harris.
And I'm Trent.
And we are going to tell you all about some lovely literature this week. How are you guys doing tonight?
Tired.
Getting over the cold, getting over the crud, the plague, the rhinovirus, the fuck you, you're going to sneeze and cough, and all those lovely things, virus.
I think you just could have stopped at word. I'm getting over the fuck you. Oh, well, before we get into the reviews, what's everybody reading right now?
I am reading the 5th season, which Brandon has already reviewed once. It's okay so far. It's getting better as it goes. And I'm also reading Nightmares and Dreamscapes, which is a 1990s short story collection by Stephen King, because I still plan to get through all of these books of his by the end of December.
How many you got left? Oh, you were about to say that.
well, one of his books just came out like last week, so there's
the one he wrote with his son.
Yeah, I have to add that one in. It's another long one. So
it's a tome.
So if I don't count the one I'm reading, I have 5.
That's doable.
But one of them's The Stand.
Oh, that may not be doable as much.
And one of them's Insomnia. Audiobook.
Yeah, seriously. How about you, Brandon? What have you been reading? Comedy answer first?
Well, yeah, sure, why not? Though I sort of wanted to make it a surprise, but
no, then don't. If this is a surprise, it should be, because man, that's a thing you've been reading.
Yeah. I also have Swan Song by Robert McCammon on deck. I don't really have anything else I'm reading. I'm trying to decide what I want to read. Too many of my damn books are long, and I just don't feel like. The book I'm reviewing today, really wasn't that long, and it took me longer than it should have to finish it, because it's a fantasy novel, and for whatever reason, fantasy right now, traditional fantasy, is sort of being lumped in with science fiction. That it's just, for whatever reason, I just have no motivation whatsoever.
That sucks, man. I kind of know what you're doing. I kind of know where you're at with that, though. So I'm only reading one book, and that book is Annihilation, which is by Jeff Vandermeer. This was a pretty big deal a couple years ago when it came out. It's the first book in the Southern Reach trilogy, and it is also being adapted into a film. Well, it's been adapted into a film. It's coming out next year. It's from the writer and director of Ex Machina, which I loved that movie, so I'm really looking forward to the adaptation. And the day after we saw the trailer the first time, after we saw Kingsman, because we got much better trailers with Kingsman than we did Blade Runner somehow, we went to a new bookstore here in town called Page 158 Books, which is in Wake Forest, North Carolina. If you're listening to this and you're in Raleigh, go check out Page 158 Books. They're a really cool little shop. They had all 3 books, and Joe saw it and she was like, we have to buy one book today. I know we can't really afford it, but we're in a new bookstore. We have to buy one book. I'm like, all right, I can do that. And so I looked around for probably 25 minutes, and the store was really nice. I saw like 8 books I wanted to buy. But I chose this one because with the movie coming out, I need to finally fulfill the promise to myself that I'd read this book after our buddy Sean recommended it several years ago. I cannot wait to review this book. Our favorite listener, Kitty, she's going to, I don't know if she's read this book or not, but I can't wait to give my golden recommendation of this book, because it's a book she will love, I think, because of how much she likes Lovecraft. And this is, to me, what I wish Lovecraft did, because it's Lovecraft's style of unnerving dread, but not boring as piss. Sorry, I don't like Lovecraft's writing. I tried, though. I really did try. But anyway, Annihilation. Can't wait to review it next week. Once I finished it, I still have about 60 pages, because I've been staying up way too late playing video games this week to finish it. But I'm going to finish it, and then I'm going to be reading probably Ann Leckie's new novel, or I'm going to put it off and like have it as that gorgeous cherry on top of my reading Sunday. After reading, I've got a book that I'm really looking forward to reading called My Best Friend's Exorcism, and I really want to read that book. It looks amazing in a very goofy, like comedy kind of way. Have you heard about that one, Trent, by any chance?
No.
It's kind of a like comedic riff on 1980s exploitation horror, and it's and the book cover is actually stylized after an old VHS box that came from a rental store and is really beat up. It's awesome. And the back cover, instead of having illustration, it's got like screenshots out of a bad 80s horror movie. The cover alone sold me, and the fact that the author wrote a nonfiction book about 80s horror makes me very excited to read it. It looks cool. So yeah, I'm reading Annihilation. I'll talk about it more next time. Brandon, I think, is going to be reviewing the first book tonight, though.
Sure.
The first book ever created.
Yes.
Well,
he's going to review the Bible.
To be fair,
Good luck not pissing off the conservatives for this one.
Well, what's funny is, to a degree, in a way, this is sort of a Bible, at least for the universe this book takes place in. So,
that was a very good way to say that without angering the conservatives.
Yeah. I read Age of Myth, the first in the Legends of the First Empire by Michael J. Sullivan. This is it technically is a prequel series, but it takes place 3,000 or 4,000 years before his original book took place.
Oh man, this is pulling a Lucas.
Yeah, so this is like really, really so far back that you don't really need to even have read his original stuff because it just wouldn't even matter. Even if you read this stuff and went back and read his newer books, the ones that were more newer, at least in timeline wise, it still wouldn't matter because one of the things that he tried to incorporate with these books is what you think you know and what actually happened isn't always the same thing. Like, stories change over time, so what really happened generally is never what actually happened. So this takes place before, of course, the First Empire was born, which is this long-reigning empire in the original series that united the lands and kept everyone safe from massacring one another because none of the races in these books like one another for some reason. Dwarves are paranoid schizophrenias, it seems like. The elves are elves. They're the self-important, we think everybody else is scum, and humans are the unlikely underdog that somehow or another keeps finding ways to keep going like vermin. So unlike his original books centered around two people. They were pretty much the only ones who got point of views. Every now and then someone else would, but it was mostly just those two core characters that everybody else just supported, and so it was not so much in the epic range of things. It was just a much more traditional, straightforward fantasy. This one, however, has many different points of views, like epic fantasy likes to be. Most of it, well, right now I can't say most of it. There's two females, a guy, and that might actually be it at the moment. I know there's going to be more as the series goes on. He talked about when he was writing this series, because his writing style is he writes the entire series and then starts releasing it. He does it this way so he can weave his little mysteries and everything as he's writing it, so he's not, releasing a book, starting and writing the next one a year later, and possibly messing things up.
I know what that's like.
Yeah,
I know what that's like. Way too much.
Yeah, see that's tough. Those type of things I have noticed can happen where continuity errors pop up. This way, if he needs to go back and change something, he can, because the other book's not out yet. He can do whatever he wants. So he writes them all, and then he goes back and he edits them as he goes and releases them. This series originally was supposed to be like 2 or 3 books and ended up being 6. Thank God it's not going to take 6 years, because I don't really want to wait 6 years to read a series. That just seems like an awful long time. I know some people have waited longer for others, but I just don't think I have the patience for something like that.
Well, you're getting tested on that.
But
office.
But at least with that, it's the last book in the series, even though I'm having to wait 5 or 6 years for it. But with this one, his writing, I like his writing. It's very clean. It's mostly easy to get along with. I found that I had the problem with this book that I had with his first book in his original series was, I think he might need just a little more work in his initial world building. It's a little I struggled with it enough in his original books that I almost actually did not continue with his writing, which would have sucked, because I ended up, like, once I did go to the next book, I blasted through all the rest of them in like a week or 2.
Jesus.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that's sort of the same thing here. He just has to establish things, and I guess it's not always the best, I guess. But other than that, the character writing is still great. He likes to keep a bit of comedy in his writing, and it's still there. That's probably one of my favorite aspects about his original books is how the humor level that's in them, and the fact that it doesn't compromise what's going on. It's never at a wrong time, and it does help offset some of the things that can happen. He has that here. The thing about this series versus last is the majority of the main characters are female. A lot of the side characters that are actually going to be involved with the story are going to be female. Not that it's a bad thing, but what I'm saying is that if you're sort of looking for a more, female-driven, feminist, pro, not women or have to be saved type of book, that would be this series, obviously. But on the flip side, though I know it's not true, so far it feels like all the male characters that actually have a role outside of the two male characters that are actually main characters, they're all dicks. Everybody's a goddamn dick. They, like there was one character in the book, for the entire book, the main female character, she's going through a personal struggle that just happened to her, and then you find out something, and you're like, oh, great. So everyone's a fucking dick. Even that's a dick, and it's like, I'm not sure which I'm even more annoyed about. The fact that there's a potential love triangle later on, or the fact that this person did what he did. Am I mad about the fact that he did it, or am I mad at the fact that she has no way of getting any resolution because he's dead? Though I think it's more because the simple fact that the writer chose to have him do something that ultimately doesn't add anything to the story, and at this point I was just so annoyed by the fact that every single male character just seemed like a fucking asshole.
Oh, okay. Are they dicks or assholes?
They're dicks and assholes.
They're dicks and assholes?
Yes, there's dicks and assholes. The assholes,
Get fucked by the dicks.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, because you have certain characters who are from the elf race who are dicks. They seem like they're trying to be nice people, but ultimately they're just manipulating and fucking you. And then you have the assholes who go around fucking with other people, but are ultimately just getting fucked themselves. See? Dicks and assholes.
And fucking.
Yes, and fucking.
Not quite as rousing as a speech of the as that scene from Team America, though.
No.
I'm a little disappointed.
I don't remember that one enough to be able to do something like that.
If you had remembered that entire bit, having only seen that movie once, that would have been a very impressive quote just
Yeah,
now.
no, I can't remember all that.
I can't either, but it is like the best part of that movie to me.
So you're saying this book has elves that are
Elves.
basically in the modern day.
They are the modern rendition of elves who are just. Though they're a little worse than most modern elves, because most modern elves, they don't want any involvement with any other race. They don't want you to be near them. They don't want you to talk to them.
They want to make Middle Earth great again.
Yeah, if they see you, they won't
it's
try.
The worst.
They won't try and kill you. They'll just they just don't want anything to do with it. These elves, however, they've sort of like they basically lost their way because they're putting themselves on pedestal of gods in a world where gods literally walk the earth. Not that anyone actually knows this, but they do have a strong. At least in the original book, they maintain that they have a very strong faith that's really not present in this book. So I'm a little confused. But they see themselves akin to gods, and they treat everyone else, including dwarves, like scum. So, oh, I'm sorry. Did you cross my river? Did you cross my river? Yes, you're dead.
That's my river. You cannot cross that river.
Yes, pretty much. That's exactly how it's like. You crossed my river. I have to kill you now. You are dead. You are dead.
One more question. One question I have for you, Brandon. Does this book fit the "There's always an empire" rule?
What's that?
That in everything fantasy or science fiction, there's an empire, and it's usually terrible. Or is the empire a benevolent one?
It's sort of. There is an empire. The Elven race sort of basically does have an empire. There is one king who they feel that when he is king, he was chosen by their god to be the ruler. That doesn't stop them from bickering and being assholes to one another, but they have that's their belief, and like one of their big thing is that they're not allowed to kill one another. They hold their beliefs so strongly that they feel that there's a law that says that if you kill another one of your race, you're locked out from the afterlife forever. You will never go. So they do not kill one another. Even the worst of their kind will not kill another one of his own kind for fear that he will never be able to go to the afterlife.
Huh.
It's weird. That's one of the weird things about his world building so far. And I realize that you gotta have drama, but I feel like if you created a race that religion is so ingrained into their like existence that I have a hard time understanding how one would go against the grain, because so many of them do. Like by the end of the book, like you have a couple of defectors, and it doesn't completely make a lot of sense for that to happen if they have such strong beliefs in their faith. But anyway, that otherwise, if they didn't, then the story wouldn't continue, and you wouldn't have the legend that eventually takes place. But other than that, it was a good book. It was interesting to see us men basically in our caveman days in his version of life. In this book, you see the creation of pockets. You see what? Yes, there's this scene, and this is, of course, it's a female. Of course, like I said, if you want a female-driven story where females actually take place in things, this will be it. She's doing something. They describe her as a genius, and they ask like, "What are you doing?" I mean, if you need like bigger fabric, we can go get you bigger. She's like, "No. I sew this on here so I can put things in them. You know, like I'm always having to go retrieve like new tools because I can only carry so many with me. But now I have these pouches, and I call them pockets." And
that's still not as bad as the invention of blue jeans in Briscoe County
what's
Jr.
funny is it did remind me of that. I thought about that when I read that part, and the character was like, "That's genius." And I'm like, "Oh my dear God, did y'all just discover fire too?"
Thanks for the donuts, Duncan.
Oh God! Oh God!
I love that show so much. It's so goofy.
Yes, it
it's
is.
so great. I love it. I hate that it only got a season.
But so far with the book, I've enjoyed it. I'm interested in seeing where it goes and how it eventually gets to the ending and what's going to be different, because it's not I already know it's not going to be the same. He says at the very beginning, it's not going to be what you think it is. I will say that I am happy that the books ended up going in a different direction that even he initially thought they were going to do. I mean, his initial concept, I don't know why this was his initial concept. It was a little dumb to base your legend on, but it was like you have this foreign commander leader coming into this country, falls in love with a resistance leader who has a triangle with a national hero from her neck of the woods. And I was like, why the fuck does a book have to have a love triangle? What? I mean, it doesn't. Why do those things need to exist? Hell, I'm okay without any romance whatsoever. It's a traditional fantasy novel. Why do you need to incorporate these things? Hell, that's one of the reasons why I haven't read Elf Songs of Shannara. I can't stand this shit. Even though I know it gets resolved in that book, it annoys the concept annoys me to the point that I actively avoid books that have them.
Mm-hmm.
But thankfully, he said that that he got so invested in his support characters for this book that he completely abandoned it in favor of writing about everyone else because he found it to be a more engaging and interesting story.
Well, a lot of writers used to put it in because, especially in genre fiction, because they thought that was the only way that they could get women to read their books. Oh,
trust me, I know because.
But that's a really sexist viewpoint. But that's what they thought.
Honestly, that's not changed.
No, it hasn't.
If you're a female author.
Teen paranormal romance.
Even the adult version of that, a lot of them feel that they have to include that or they will not get published. And honestly, right. They probably wouldn't.
No, they wouldn't. I mean,
there's very few that actually do that section of writing and do not have it. But yeah, when it comes to like the older fantasy and look at Robin McKinley with Blue Sword and what's that second book, The Hero and the Crown. The Hero and the Crown has a fucking pointless, doesn't do anything for the plot love triangle. Why? Because I guess it needs to exist because people seem to expect it in young adult novels. It's fucking irritating, and I mean, hell, I'm not really for the insta love thing either. I like dynamics. I'd like to see people grow. I like I want to see people actually, go through changes and things and do things together and come out, improved people. And do they end up together? Sure, they could. I don't care. But I don't need any point in my story for the character to stop and look at two people and say, which one?
Oh my God! No, really?
Why can't I? This is not literal, but this is like a summarization of what this trope is like and why I hate it. Because
to be fair, I had the same feeling. I did read The Hunger Games because it came with my Nook, and I was like, the movie's coming out. The movie doesn't look terrible, and then I started reading the movie. I was like, shit, it's that kind of book.
Yes, but I will say that while it's annoying in The Hunger Games, it's not as bad as it can be.
It's not as bad as it can be, but like it was so distracting because it's like, hey, we have this book, and serious things are happening.
Yeah.
But I got two boyfriends.
Yeah, and that's one of the aspects that annoys me about it because it stops the story. The worst offender is stuff like Twilight.
Oh yeah, as always.
Which basically is where it happens is, girl, two guys. Because if you do the reverse, that guy is universally hated by everybody for no goddamn reason. But you got the two guys. Both the writer will write both of them as appealing characters to create your teen division, and will make the female completely retarded in being able to decide between the two, making her a shallow motherfucker and making the two guys who supposedly are like the people who help take care of like your resistance or your military, or they're like supposed to be major important people in this universe, resorted down to people groveling at her fucking feet trying to get her to decide. That is not how real life is.
No.
And I understand that, and they'll be like, well, we don't want real life. I'm like, no, you want a fantasy. I mean, if you want, just go read fucking porn. You got limp dick Laurel Hamilton, okay? Go read that. If you really got to have this shit, do that. But it's one of the reasons why I can't read young adult. It's because so many young adult novels have this problem. And it may not be as bad if it wasn't for Twilight, who popularized the idea. I mean, yes, it did, like I mentioned Robert McKinley in The Hero and the Crown. Yes, was there a love triangle? Yes. But it wasn't an angsty, can't decide between two people love triangle. It was, she has her childhood friend who she's devoted to because she spent much of her life with him. She gets separated and ends up spending a number of years with somebody else and falls in love with that guy. It's not like she, is around two people all the time and can't decide. It's just separation of time, and eventually, shit happens.
That's why I like the Young Wizard Chronicles.
Yeah,
that doesn't really come up.
No, it. What I've read of it, which I need to continue it. It does. Some of the romance stuff does pop up every now and then, but it's very, very small portions.
Yeah.
Of the books, and what's better is it doesn't leave the characters clean. The character is changed by it a little. They're not just like, oh, sorry, okay, you were the love interest of the book, and now you're gone, and now I'm over here doing something else, and I no longer mention you or think about you. You didn't matter. It actually had some small impact, which is how it should be. Like going back to the Hero and the Crown, I didn't like how she did it at all because it was a dick move. Regardless if the other party member was accepting of the situation, it was still an asshole thing to do. But that's the other thing. There's another thing that they'll. I just hate love triangles. I try to avoid them. They're not good for books. I've yet to read one that's written well, because authors don't know how to, because they sort of like, with. I'm trying to make some allusion to video games and microtransactions and loot crates, but my mind's not thinking clearly at that moment in time. But they feel together. They feel they have to get their books sold. I honestly feel that's what it is. Because I can't believe that so many people want to write that stuff in their books, that they have nothing else they want to write about other than the romance that's going on. Yeah, if you want to have romance, that's fine, but don't forget that your book has other shit going on.
And that it has characters that are supposed to be reflective of human beings, that have things that go on in their lives other than in their pants.
Yes. And unfortunately, I mean, the most interesting love triangle I ever read, and it's not really a love triangle anymore, or at all, was that book I told y'all about a few weeks back, that the one about the libromancy, where it's two girls and a guy, but one of the girls
pizza place.
Yeah, but one of the girls is a lesbian, so it's not really it works out to a point. I don't know, it's weird. The book's still fucking weird. But yeah, so I just wish people would just stop. It's really annoying, and I'm glad that as I was reading, it annoyed me to the point that I researched what he was going to do with the series, just so I can know if I can continue it or not. Because if that shit was in there, and it was going to be a heavy thing, because he does like his character interactions, not so much that has to be romance, but he wants his characters to interact. So it would come up if it was going to be involved, and I would have stopped reading it if it was something that was just going to be a mainstay. But it ends up that he abandons it, thank God. And makes it more of a this one guy's just really devoted to her because she's such a charismatic person. Most of one half because she's female in a world that's technically dominated by males. So yeah, that's my review, rant, and la da da.
It's quite the rant and review.
Yeah.
Because it was definitely both. All right, so I'm going to jump in here. I've got a book to review. And it's one I've been looking forward to reviewing for a couple weeks now. This book is called Everything Unusual. It's by Nicholas Karatu. Karatu, yes. And full disclosure, because we do disclosures here, because we are professionals and we disclose the source of our books. First and foremost, I know Nick. I worked with him when I was living in Winston-Salem, and I was there whenever he was writing the earliest parts of this book, and he sent me a copy of this book after it was released. It is I'm going to be honest, I'm not sure if at this point if it is considered self-published or if it is handled by the publisher that he told me at one point that he was working with, which was World Castle. I didn't ask. I didn't think it relevant. But I just wanted to clarify that, yes, he did send me this book, and I told him that I was also going to review it on the show, because Nick's a great guy, and honestly, Nick's actually a very good author. Nick's a very good writer, and he told me the goals he had in mind for this book, and I'm going to be discussing this book now, which is called Everything Unusual. It is about this kid named Elliot Winter, and the fact that Elliot's kind of got some... he has a very peculiar set of abilities. Also, his mother is a complete psychopath and hates him because he looks too much like his alcoholic father, Sam. Marilyn is a complete psychopath. I understand why Sam drinks. So he starts seeing a psychiatrist, Dr. Escherman. And Dr. Escherman is interested in Elliot, but not for the... not for the usual reasons. He understands Elliot's powers a little bit better than Elliot does. I'm going to gloss over a lot of this book because there's a lot that goes on in the first half of this book that is it is set up for what happens later, but at the same time, a lot of things go quiet in the second half of this book. Whenever Elliot goes to basically another, I say world, but it's still Earth, but it's very surreal. Shit gets surreal in the second half of this book. Whenever Elliot goes to a new town where Marilyn and Sam are completely normal and happily married and totally his parents now, rather than two people that bat him around like a piece of garbage. And he's going to school with people who say things that are very unusual and talk about things that are not exactly normal happening, and other things that are very strange happen with the other students. This is not a very long book. It clocks in at about 250 pages. And I don't want to reveal what goes on here. I just want to give it a bit of a color of the plot. It is... You could technically call this book young adult fiction, and I don't mean that in the modern sense. It's not modern in the sense that Elliot's the chosen one, and we're going to all rally around him as he fights the evil thing, because it's not really that kind of story. This is more in the sense of, like, The Giver is young adult fiction. I mean, and I know that I just called out the whole chosen one thing, and that's kind of a trope that's in The Giver, but the language that's on display and the way that Nick writes is more of classic fiction. Like, the way he actually writes a sentence and the way he sets a scene is... And I don't mean this in a negative way. Please understand that I mean this in the most positive way possible. This book reads like it was written 40 years ago. And I mean that in the way that it colors the scene with very long descriptions of setting and scene, and it paints a more beautiful picture on the page than I'm used to from the young adult genre, and that is excellent, and that is definitely the strongest point of this book. At times, I will admit that there's a bit of a word economy issue going on as a result of trying to paint the scene that way. And it's that there are wasted words where 3 words were used where 1 would do. And that's something that I would notice, being a writer myself. And I would notice that there's just too many words on the page describing something. And not in the sense that description is not good, that, again, 3 words where 1 would do would have kept the same exact feel intact. But instead we just have a little bit too much. But it doesn't. It's not a make or break thing. It's an issue where a little bit more editing could have made the book stronger. But the narrative and the flow of the narrative actually kept me going. It's a slower burn than most books of the genre of the YA genre specifically, or most fiction nowadays. Anyway, I don't know if you guys notice it as much, but most fiction from new authors kind of like hits the ground running and goes hard and burns right to the end. But not this book. This book takes its time to do everything that it does and really set up the type of story that it is. And I have a very hard time describing exactly what's going on the page, because, and this is the book's biggest problem, is that it didn't end. This book did not end. It does not have an ending. And I did ask Nick, and he's going to be working on a follow-up to continue the story. The book has something relative to a climax, so it does follow something relative to a 3-act structure, but with the book being divided into 2 parts, very specifically part 1 and part 2 in the book, there are things that happen in the first half of this book that are really intriguing, and I want to understand what the implications of those events are. Dr. Eshelman disappears after about page 98. But whenever you go into the second part of this book, you don't see any of those characters again. Part and is a player in the plot again. And by the time that she becomes an element in what the 3rd act is and how this book ends, it's so unusual and so it's strange and I love the surrealism on display. But then it gets to that final scene, and it has like it has a scene break and one line for the outro for the denouement, and it just ends. And I won't lie, it frustrated the ever loving hell out of me that I didn't get a resolution for the majority of what took place in the book. But the good part about this, and I want to kind of go on the fact that I enjoyed the book so much is why it frustrated me. If I hadn't liked the rest of the book, it wouldn't be that big of a deal that I didn't get an ending. It would have been another black mark against the book. Instead, it's a very interesting story that based on the first 20 pages, I could have seen this book frustrating most people because Marilyn is almost like stereotype horrible as a parent, and how abusive she is. She's almost like a cliche of an abusive parent, but the dichotomy that's created between her and perfect Marilyn in part 2 is it makes for a fascinating. This whole book, just everything that happens in between these two sections makes for a fascinating read. But I'm angry that I don't have the ending. I wish that this was the whole book right now, rather than what I have. So I'm going to give the quick rating on this. Whenever I brought this one over to Goodreads, I gave it a 4 out of 5, very specifically because the ending frustrates me, and I want more. I want that resolution that's going to be there, because I know that whenever the book ended, that Elliot's in another world than where the second one ends, or than where the second one took place. And I want to know what's there, because to give you a good idea, and this is sort of spoiler territory, and I apologize. Dr. Escherman directly references Lovecraft, and that means that there's something. I know that has to mean that there's something more sinister, kind of like hanging over the narrative that's in play. The authority that's mentioned in part 2 is an allusion to that, but I don't think that they are the architects of all of the darkness that has to be taking place in this book. I could be wrong, and if I am, that's fine, because they were ominous enough. But I need more. I need more of this book, and the fact that I don't have it already is a bit of a downer on the overall execution of the book. That, and if anything that Nick should take into writing the next one, it's a bit of a cleaner edit, which is typical of first time writing or first time author and more so self-published books, and it's something that can be easily overlooked. Something that I'm going to look at more strongly, because it's going to irk me more than it will everyone else, because some of those edits most people aren't going to notice. So don't let that aspect of my criticism be weighed too heavily. It's an excellent book, and if you're looking for something that can appeal to more people than some of the fare I've been reading lately, like this is no Bunny Monroe or anything. This is a great book overall, and I want people to read it. Go and read Nick's book, because Nick's a hell of an author, and I think he deserves the readers. Trent, I think you're up at bat.
Okay, my review is going to be kind of short. I read a book called Running with the Demon. It's by Terry Brooks, who I've, reviewed quite a few of his books on here before from the Shannara series. Which, when this was written, it was not part of the Shannara series. It wasn't until 10 years after it was released that he decided, okay, well, I'm going to tie it in with the Shannara series.
All roads lead to Shannara.
Yep. Well, no, because he has another series that is not related.
Okay.
Yeah. But anyway, this book is the first book in the Word and Void series. It takes place in a little town in Illinois in 1997, which is when the book came out. Focuses on this 14-year-old girl named Ness Fremont. She lives near a park, and she's basically the caretaker for this park because she has a sort of magic, and she doesn't really use magic that much because she's been warned not to. It's passed down through her family on her mother's side, and her mother is dead, but she lives with her grandmother and grandfather, and her grandmother tells her never to use it, really. But in the park, she helps care for it to keep what they call the feeders away. They're sort of it's hard to explain because I don't think he explained them very well in the book. There's some sort of animal or something that they basically feed on negative energy, like anger and negative thoughts, I guess. And after a while, if they get powerful enough, they can kill people. Helping her in the park is this other creature that he's described as being made of like twigs and leaves and stuff. They call him Sylvan, called Pick. I guess you could say he's sort of her mentor. He's a few inches tall, and he's kind of grumpy. I sort of imagine him as like a 6-inch tall, grumpy gnome. So there's them, and then there's this other main character named John Ross, and because of his name, I keep thinking Bob Ross. So I keep thinking he's got like the afro type hair and a paintbrush. And he is what they call a Knight of the Word. Basically, the word is goodness. There's some talk in the book on whether it's God or not, and the void obviously is the negative side. So he fights against the void, and he comes into town right before the 4th of July, basically seeking out Nest, because he's following a demon who works for the Void, and it seems like the demon has come to her town as well. And of course, the demon is up to no good. He's after Nest as well. Now, there's also this other stuff going on in the town about there's some sort of strike at a factory or something. And the union is fighting with the factory, and the demon is using the strikers, sort of influencing them to do some damage during the 4th of July fireworks. that are being sponsored by the factory, cause some harm, quote unquote, accidentally. But this all comes together towards the end of the book. It's really just a big setup for the second and third book in the series, which is why I'm having a hard time talking about this. It's hard to tell that this would be a Shannara book at all. It doesn't feel like one. And as I said, it wasn't a Shannara book until 10 years after it came out, when a series called The Genesis of Shannara came out and basically worked it into the mythos. Because if you've read the first Shannara book, you know that basically Shannara is the world after many eons after nuclear war basically destroys the planet. And since this is 1997, obviously there hasn't been a nuclear war yet. But I think it's kind of a stretch to call it a Shannara book. Obviously, I haven't gotten as far as the Genesis of Shannara because I'm reading these in publication order, so that'll be a while. The book was okay. It was kind of vanilla. It's I could see what it was trying to go for. It was trying to go for a sort of young adult fantasy vibe. I guess it pulled it off. It's just not what I really wanted to read, but it was the next in the list of the books in the series to read, so I read it. The protagonist, Nest, was kind of dull, actually. I mean, I didn't really think she had much of a personality. But then again, this is let's see, the author was probably in his early 60s when he wrote this book. And he's writing the book from the viewpoint of a 14-year-old girl. From my experience, that does not work most of the time. I don't know. Your mileage may vary on that, I guess. I think I gave the book 3 stars on Goodreads. It was intriguing enough that I'm sort of looking forward to the second book in the series, which takes place like 5 years after this one. But it's pretty meh. It's hard to review a book when you're just like, I read it. Yep, on to the next.
I've read a few of those in the past couple of years. I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, and also when it's part of a series, yeah.
I think the one I had like that this year was Power Set. That was a book that I didn't hate. I didn't particularly like it, though. Still need to continue the Grand Tour novels and see if I can get into them any more than I did.
Like, oh, there's another 300 pages for my page count on Goodreads, and that's all it's good for.
I've been lucky not to have that too much lately. I've read very good books the past few books.
Yeah, the other book I read was actually better, but I didn't think I could describe it at all.
I had some issues with that without getting into spoilers. I didn't want to spoil everything unusual. Although I did want to say that, and this is just a little bit of background, Nick, if you do listen to this podcast at any point, I like the old title better, which was Kingdom of Leaves. I like that one more. It's a cool title. Probably has been used on another book, but I like Kingdom of Leaf more, personally. But that is neither here nor there, obviously. All right. Well, is that it for this week's installment?
I think so. Unless there is a fourth host somewhere that I don't know about that needs to review a book.
Well, technically that's Dorian, and I've had to. That's part of the reason I've had to silence my swearing a little bit tonight. But he's been unconscious for about an hour now. He's asleep in the recliner. All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening, and if you enjoy what we do, follow us here on YouTube or on Facebook/Twitter at ZTriggerLive. We hope you will join us next week and in 2 weeks from now when we reconvene on the Expanded Universe show. We got to get that next Star Wars book in us, guys.
Yeah, I've been looking for it, but
me too. I don't have my place to buy books around here anymore.
I've been going to Second and Charles every week, looking in the used books. Nothing yet.
I don't think I'm gonna find it used. I'm gonna have to buy it new, which sucks because. Well, actually, I'm sort of looking forward to it after playing 2 games written by the guy who wrote it. Drew Karpyshyn wrote the first 2 Mass Effects, so I think it'll be pretty good. Maybe it'll be bad. Who knows? We'll see.
Yeah,
but,
if it's bad, it'll be like, hey, 3 for 3 so far.
Seriously. There are good Star Wars books. We got to get to them at some point. All right, but yes, that'll be it for this week, and we'll see everybody next week. Good night.
Laters.
Be seeing you.